Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to our snowy garden in Spokane, Washington. We live about 300 miles east of Seattle and our hardiness zone ranges between 5B and 6A. And if you live in this area, no, it's not time to plant your crops yet. Late last year, I surveyed my followers about the different types of video topics they would be interested in my covering this year in 2025. And to my surprise, one topic that kept cropping up was crop rotation, no pun intended. How does it work? Is it applicable to a home garden? And so on. And I'm here to tell you, yes, absolutely it's applicable. And I'm going to show you three main areas where it excels. Crop rotation is definitely for any size garden, and it will help you have a healthy and productive garden every year. According to the Rodale Institute, crop rotation refers to the practice of planting different crops sequentially on the same plot of land to improve soil health, optimize nutrients in the soil, and combat pest and weed pressure. Crop rotation is something that we've probably all heard farmers do, but we figure that that applies to them, not to our small home gardens. It doesn't matter whether you have a tiny plot or a mid-sized garden, crop rotation makes all the difference, and here's why. Crop rotation helps with soil fertility. For example, if you're growing peas, they fix nitrogen in root nodules. So if you follow your pea crop with a different crop that needs a lot of nitrogen, that will benefit that second crop. A great example of this is corn. Every year we always plant corn after our pea crop is finished producing. And that works for us because peas don't care for the hot weather, so they're done fairly early in the season. If you grow root crops in a bed, such as carrots, parsnips, or turnips, they really take up the phosphorus in the soil. So it's a good idea to follow that type of crop with something that doesn't need a lot of phosphorus. And of course, it's also a good idea to add nutrients to the bed soil prior to planting a crop. Crop rotation reduces problems with soil-borne insect pests. For example, if you had a problem with root maggots in your garden, they can overwinter in the soil. So that means you don't want to follow that planting with other root crops. Another good example of this is leaf miners. They cause a lot of damage to beets, spinach, and Swiss chard. Did you have problems with plant diseases in your garden last year? It's likely the pathogens remain in the soil, which means you don't want to plant another crop that is susceptible to that same disease. For example, if your tomatoes struggled with a disease that will also affect other members of the nightshade family, such as peppers, eggplants, potatoes, and tomatillos, you don't want to plant any of those in the same location this year. I realize not everyone gardens in raised beds, although they do seem to be a lot more popular these days. But I have to admit that having raised beds makes it easier for me to rotate my vegetable crops each year. But there are other ways to rotate where you plant certain crops. If you have a little garden and there's a nasty disease that's been causing problems for your tomato plants, consider planting them or other members of the nightshade family in containers this year, and preferably the next year as well, just to be on the safe side. Another method, which nobody likes, is to skip a year or two of growing a troublesome crop. If you don't provide a disease with host crops, they should disappear from your garden. That said, there are some diseases that can overwinter on certain families of weeds. If that isn't a good incentive to keep up with the weeds in your garden, I don't know what is. To be successful at crop rotation, you really need to know your vegetable plant families. Fortunately, I've made that easy because I have a chart of them on my website, susansinthegarden.com. Just go to the Guides menu and then scroll down to Vegetable Plant Families, and here they are. So be sure to take a look. I know I touched on this earlier, but I wanted to mention one more thing. We always add compost to our raised beds in the spring. If you typically use composted manure, which is high in nitrogen, don't put it in any beds where you're going to grow root crops such as carrots, parsnips, turnips, rutabagas, beets, and radishes. The nitrogen in manure will adversely impact how they grow. For example, carrots will fork and split. You don't want that. Many years ago, I created a simple template of the layout of our raised bed vegetable garden. And each year I fill one out and I save them because crop rotation is best done on a 3 to 4 year cycle. When I'm ready to lay out our next garden, I grab the forms from the last 3 years. I usually start with nightshade family crops since it seems like they have the potential for the most disease issues. And I think, okay, where should I plant tomatoes this year? Where should the peppers go? How about eggplants and tomatillos if we're growing them? Because all of these are members of the nightshade family. So you can see in 2024, we grew tomatoes here and here. In 2023, we grew them here and here. And this one's hard to see. We had a bed on the south side of the garden where we grew the majority of our tomatoes. Then I looked to see where did the peppers grow and so on. So it's a little tricky getting going at first, and then you just fly through the different types of vegetables. After I sort the nightshade family crops out, I usually move to another plant family such as brassicas or onion family members and so on. Having these layouts also helps me know which nutrients to add to the soil for each bed. So here's the official garden layout for 2025. Although you can see I've got a bed here that's up for grabs, and I also have a question mark. I'm hoping to grow torch tithonia, which is a Mexican sunflower, and I think that's the spot I want to put them. If you have 4 raised beds, or a garden that you can divide into 4 sections, here's a suggested planting and rotation method to follow. In the first bed, you would plant brassicas. So those are things like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and kale. And you might add in some beans or peas. In the second bed, you would plant nightshade family crops. So again, those are tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, potatoes, and tomatillos. In the third bed, you would plant cucurbits. So those are crops like cucumbers, summer and winter squash, pumpkins, and melons. And maybe you might plant some lettuce. In the fourth bed, you would plant root crops, so carrots, parsnips, beets, turnips, and so on, and perhaps some onion crops such as onions and shallots. Each year, you would then move these types of crops to the next bed in the rotation. Another idea is to grow tall crops such as peas, beans, and cucumbers on a trellis or arbor within your landscape. So that would be things like peas and beans. I saw this on a garden tour, and that trellis and fence would be a great place to grow some veggies vertically. As many of you know, I wrote the Vegetable Garden Problem Solver Handbook. In addition to covering all sorts of challenges that we gardeners face, I have a chapter on vegetable plant diseases. There's a diagnostic chart where you can go to a specific crop to see what types of diseases it can get and what to look for. And there's a profile of every disease that is packed with helpful information, including how to deal with them organically. I created this chapter because I couldn't find any books with easy-to-use plant disease information. The book is in my Amazon store, and you'll find the link to it in the description for this video on my YouTube channel. I also wanted to add that my other book, the Vegetable Garden Pest Handbook, is specifically about insects. So if those are driving you nuts, that's the book you need. Okay, that's all for today. I hope you will incorporate crop rotation into your own garden because it really makes a difference. Thanks so much for watching today, everybody. Happy gardening. And yes, spring is on its way.